I'm going to move us on to radiometric dating. And some listeners might not be too familiar with this. I'll give a quote here from your book, page 92 to 93, in which you say the following. Theoretically, we can use the simple accumulation of daughter products to work out the age of a rock or mineral sample called the model age, so long as we know three things: that the rate of decay of parent to daughter has been constant over time, that the rock or mineral contained a known amount of daughter in the beginning, that the amounts of parent and daughter have not been altered during the history of the rock or mineral except by radioactive decay. In radioactive decay, you have a parent element that decays over time through alpha decay or beta decay into at least one daughter element. And then if you can measure how much daughter element is there, and you know how much of the parent was there in daughter at the beginning, and the half-life of the parent, half-life being that amount of time from a given amount of the parent element to decay to half of its beginning amount. In the past, some criticism has been made of that particular approach in regards to two of those assumptions. What happens if some of the daughter element was brought in from a different location? What if some of the daughter element was moved out? What if you estimate wrong the amount of the parent element that was there in the beginning? And so there's an alternative method called isochron dating, in which it looks at ratios of one element to another that would be the same, and that would allow one to get past some of the criticism of the procedure that I just mentioned. One of the things that was done in the RATE project, a project of a number of young Earth creationist scientists, was looking at these different dates. And this RATE project looked at different dating methods and whether or not they agreed, and what the discordant results were, and if there was a pattern to those dates. And they actually did find a pattern that was significant for the question of the assumption that decay rates have always been the same. If you look at radioactive dating that's been done, there is certainly a huge amount of time, much more than a young Earth would allow for, if decay rates are what they are today. There's a lot more of the daughter element that you would find than if Earth was only 6,000 years old at present decay rates. And the question is, are present decay rates actually rates that have always been in effect? And the RATE project, which stands for Radioisotopes in the Age of the Earth, looked at a number of different pieces of evidence and had some conclusions in which they thought that the evidence clearly showed that there was accelerated decay at some time in the past. What explains the pattern of these discordant dates in regards to why they differed and the amount of differences? The explanation was largely that there was accelerated decay that accounts for them. Now, I'm going to bring up the quote here, and I'll read it, and maybe that might explain better than what I just tried doing. It says, "These results were found to be typical. All 10 RATE studies revealed the similar patterns of discordance between different dating methods. The interesting question is why." I'm quoting Paul here from his book. Go look at page 99. "What is the explanation for these discordant dates? The RATE team thinks it has the answer. And the clue is in the fact that the discordances are not random, they are systematic. There seems to be a distinct pecking order of dates. The oldest ages are usually given by samarium neodymium, followed by uranium lead, then rubidium strontium, with the youngest ages coming from potassium argon. There is an identifiable pattern here. The isotopes which decay by alpha emission tend to give older dates than the isotopes which undergo beta decay. And the isotopes with longer half-lives seem to give older dates than those with shorter half-lives. These trends should not exist if radioactive isotopes have always decayed at a constant rate and provide accurate rock and mineral ages. However, this pattern can be explained if the standard assumption of constant decay rates is brought into question." Now, let me go on. It says, "Let us imagine for a moment that radioactive decay rates were accelerated at some time in the Earth's past. Considerations from theoretical physics suggest that the amount of acceleration would depend on the type of decay involved, alpha versus beta decay, and the length of the half-life of each parent isotope. This would result in precisely the kind of systematic differences between dating results observed by the RATE team. Indeed, the RATE scientists have argued that the only explanation for the observed trends is that radioactive decay rates have undergone one or more episodes of acceleration in the Earth's past. This is undoubtedly a radical departure from conventional thinking, but one that seems to be warranted by the systematic nature of the dating discordances." A comment here. In the past, if you were someone who's just looking at this at a surface level, you might think that young Earth creationists appeal to differing dates and sort of throw out radiometric dating as a method because of those dates. But you might look and say, well, yes, they disagree about whether it's 800 million years or 1,200 million years, but it's still far, 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 far more than 6,000 years. So at least all of the dating methods agree that the young Earth creationist is wrong. What's significant here is that the systematic nature of these discordances demonstrate that the accelerated decay took place in the past, which means that these much bigger dates should actually be brought down by orders of magnitude, such that a young Earth creationist perspective would not be ruled out in light of that accelerated decay. So it's not just as simple as saying, well, they all agree that Earth is hundreds of millions of years old. It's actually the systematic nature of the discordances show that the best explanation of this data is one in which accelerated decay took place in the past. That can explain it in a way that the assumption that decay rates have always been constant wouldn't be able to explain it. And in that case, you have to shorten by orders of magnitude the results that you have from radiometric dating in such a way that young Earth creationism would be acceptable. And I'll turn it over to Paul here because he may have some things he wants to add at that. He's read more about this than I have there.
Yeah, no, I think you explained it very well. I think partly the problem is that in the past, those who are who accept an old Earth have tended to look at the radiometric dates, and they see that they give ages in millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of years, and that there is a clear trend that older rocks which we know are older from other geological evidence, for example their position in the geological column, tend to give older radiometric ages than younger rocks. So there's a clear trend. And so those who accept an old Earth look at the overall trend and they say, look, it kind of makes sense with an old Earth. What creationists have tended to do in the past is point to the anomalies, where here are dates that actually contradict other dates on the same rocks, and so they tend to point to the anomalies and say, look, there must be some problem with the radiometric dating system. And I think what we need to do is be in a position where we can actually explain all of the data.
Yeah.
We need to be able to explain what the trend means, but also explain the anomalous data and not just kind of explain away the anomalies. And I think that's the strength of the hypothesis of accelerated decay, because it explains the trend, because according to the hypothesis of accelerated decay, there really has been a great deal of radioactive decay in the history of the Earth, and older rocks have experienced more radiometric decay than younger rocks. So that explains the overall trend. But the anomalies are also telling us something very interesting, because as you pointed out, the anomalous dates are not anomalous in a random fashion. There's a systematic nature to the discordances that we see, so that certain radioactive isotope systems consistently give older ages than other systems on the same rocks, on the same rock or mineral samples.
Yeah.
So there is this, as I mentioned in the book, a kind of pecking order of dates. So samarium neodymium gives you the oldest ages, followed by uranium lead, followed by rubidium strontium, followed by potassium argon. And accelerated decay seems to explain why that systematic pattern of discordances exists. So the reason I like the hypothesis of accelerated decay is because it seems to explain more of the data.
Yeah, which is what
it explains the trend and the anomalies, and that's the mark of a good scientific theory. You want a good scientific theory to be able to explain as much of the data as possible.
Yeah.
and of course, the rate group also pointed to other evidences besides the systematic discordances that appeared to point in the same direction.
Thank you for listening. Credible Faith is a global missions-minded apologetics ministry with content available in 7 different languages across 7 websites: German, Russian, Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and English. If you would like to support the global apologetics work of Credible Faith, go to crediblefaith.org and click on the donate icon. If you would like me to give an apologetics workshop or participate in a debate at your university, or if you would like me to give a Great Commission missions conference or apologetics conference at your church, get in touch with me through the Contact Us section of the Credible Faith website. You can also submit a request through the website to get Credible Faith's monthly email. If you are a native speaker of Russian, German, Italian, French, Spanish, or Portuguese, and if you notice that an essay from the English website is not available on the Credible Faith website for your language, feel free to get in touch with me about translating the essay, and I would read through your translated material for quality control and the desire to see content from the essay made available in your language. Thank you for listening, and have a great night.